A while back, we discussed what is called irreducible complexity. Now, don't turn me off because I'm using big words. Let me explain if you don't already understand this. Irreducible complexity is an argument that says that the evolutionary process is impossible because each cell, and then each organism made up of billions of these cells, would have to come into existence in a fully functional state, or it couldn't have survived any sort of evolutionary process to begin with. For example, most, if not all, the parts of the whole, such as the eye for seeing, the ear for hearing, the tongue for tasting and speaking, etc., could not function unless or until they were fully functional. So any sort of millions of years process just isn't possible. The eyeball would be totally useless and unusable unless it were then fully developed. And it makes absolutely no sense to claim that for millions of years, the developing human being had a useless thing growing on its face, and with each new offspring, it may have changed a little tiny bit until after tens of thousands worth of births and deaths covering millions of years, finally that useless thing on the face of the human being began to work, and it just happened to be an eyeball. And the evolutionists will claim that after being utterly useless through those millions of years, and always changing in tiny increments, the eye couldn't really see even when it became functional because it didn't have a lens. But never fear, after unknown numbers, hundreds of thousands or millions more years, the human eye just developed a lens out of nowhere, with nothing causing it or guiding it to do so. Now, this absurd fairy tale is flawed for a number of reasons, but one main argument is the natural evolutionary development of the eyeball as we just described it. The eyeball itself only works when it's developed fully. That's what's irreducible complexity. You can't just have a partial eyeball hanging on human beings' faces for millions of years and then finally it works, which is what evolutionary science claims. If the eye were useful in its various stages of development, as the fictional authors of evolutionary science have invented, it might seem somewhat plausible that the human body continued this unguided, unconscious pathway toward what we now have as the human eye. But that's not the case. The eye was useless at every stage until the very end, when it supposedly developed into the seeing eye. And the evolutionist still admits at some point the eye worked but didn't have a lens, so humanity was legally blind at that point. And then the human body just unconsciously wanted something it didn't even know existed. Sight. And it wanted to be able to see clearly. So it developed something it didn't know existed called a lens. It's just absurd. Natural selection, specifically the unguided, naturalistic, atheistic kind argued for by the non-theist, cannot legitimately explain these irreducibly complex systems, which include the simple single-cell organism to begin with, by the way. And outside of the claims of natural selection, there is no other explanation for the supposed evolution of such irreducibly complex organs. Therefore, the best explanation for the existence of such irreducibly complex systems, like the eye, the ear, the tongue, the lungs, the heart, etc., is that God exists, the intelligent designer. And of course, this isn't a standalone argument. You add this one to all the other logical reasons for believing God, the accuracy of Bible prophecy in addition to its accurate history, and the supporting evidence of archaeology and science, and you have overwhelming evidence for God. I urge believers, settle your mind on God, and upon learning His Word and following the guidance provided by the divinely inspired words in 2 Peter 1:16. For we have not followed cunningly devised fables, which is what natural selection, evolutionary science is, when we made known unto you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but were eyewitnesses of His majesty. Junk the fables, embrace the truth in the person and work and words of Jesus Christ.